Operation Barbarossa was the code name for Nazi Germany's invasion of the Soviet Union. It began on June 22, 1941. Adolf Hitler launched this assault with immense force, aiming to conquer the western regions of the Soviet Union. The scale of the invasion was unprecedented in human history. Millions of soldiers, thousands of tanks and aircraft were thrown into this colossal conflict. The significance of Operation Barbarossa cannot be overstated. It was the largest land invasion ever mounted, stretching from the Baltic Sea to the Black Sea. This operation transformed the European war into a truly global conflict. The failure of Barbarossa marked the beginning of the end for Nazi Germany. The conflict on the Eastern Front was characterized by unparalleled brutality. Nazi ideology viewed Slavs as subhuman and communism as an existential threat. This led to horrific war crimes and atrocities on a massive scale. Millions of Soviet prisoners of war were deliberately starved or worked to death. Civilian populations faced systematic extermination and brutal reprisals. The Soviet regime responded with its own brand of ruthlessness. This essay will explore the multifaceted aspects of Operation Barbarossa. We will delve into its ideological roots, the precarious Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact and the German military planning. Finally, the broader impact of Operation Barbarossa on World War II and the enduring historical lessons it offers will be discussed. At the dark heart of Nazi Germany's aggression lay the concept of Lebensraum. Adolf Hitler and the Nazi Party believed that the German people needed more territory to flourish. They looked eastward toward the vast, fertile lands of the Soviet Union. These lands were seen as essential for agricultural production and rich in natural resources. Conquering these territories was a cornerstone of Hitler's foreign policy. This territorial ambition was linked to Nazi racial ideology. The Nazis considered Slavic peoples to be Untermenschen, or subhumans. This racist doctrine dehumanized the inhabitants of the Soviet Union. Furthermore, Nazism was fanatically anti-communist. The invasion was framed as a crusade to destroy communism and its alleged Jewish masterminds. Hitler's desire to invade the Soviet Union was not a sudden impulse. He had articulated this ambition as early as the 1920s in Mein Kampf. Geopolitically, control of Eastern Europe would make Germany an unassailable global power. The destruction of the Soviet Union was seen as a prerequisite for achieving German hegemony over Europe. In August 1939, the world was stunned by the announcement of the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact. This non-aggression treaty between Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union seemed an impossible alliance. The two nations were ideological arch-enemies, yet pragmatism brought them together. The public part of the pact committed both countries to neutrality if the other became involved in a war. The true significance of the pact lay in its secret protocols. These clauses divided Eastern Europe into German and Soviet spheres of influence. Poland was to be partitioned between the two powers. For Hitler, the pact secured his eastern flank. Stalin too had his reasons for signing the pact. He deeply distrusted the Western powers and suspected they were trying to steer German aggression eastward. The pact offered him a way to divert the immediate German threat and gain valuable time. Despite its immediate benefits, the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact was an alliance built on sand. Hitler never had any intention of honoring the pact in the long term. Stalin miscalculated, perhaps hoping for a longer period of peace. Even as German troops massed on the Soviet border, Stalin largely dismissed intelligence warnings of an impending invasion. Section 4. Forging the War Machine. German Military Planning and Overconfidence. The German plan for the invasion of the Soviet Union was codenamed Operation Barbarossa. It was formally authorized by Hitler's Directive 21 on December 18, 1940. The plan outlined a massive three-pronged assault. Army Group North was tasked with capturing the Baltic states and Leningrad. Army Group Center aimed for Smolensk and then Moscow. Army Group South was to secure the resource-rich Ukraine and advance towards the Caucasus oil fields. The overarching goal was to defeat the Red Army west of the Dvina and Dnieper rivers. A swift victory was anticipated. The scale of the forces assembled by Germany and its Axis allies was staggering. Over 3 million German soldiers were deployed for the initial invasion. They were supported by hundreds of thousands of troops from Finland, Romania, Hungary, Italy, and Slovakia. German military planners and Hitler himself were buoyed by an almost unshakable overconfidence. The swift defeat of Poland and the rapid collapse of France had convinced them of the superiority of German military doctrine. However, this overconfidence blinded the German leadership to critical flaws in their planning. Section 5, Blitzkrieg in the East. Initial triumphs of Barbarossa. The invasion commenced in the early hours of June 22, 1941. German forces launched a surprise attack along the entire front. The Soviet border defenses were caught largely unprepared. The Luftwaffe struck Soviet airfields with devastating effect. Hundreds of Soviet aircraft were destroyed on the ground in the first few hours. This immediate aerial supremacy allowed German ground forces to advance rapidly. The coordination between German panzer groups, motorized infantry, and air support was initially seamless. The Red Army units stationed near the border were quickly overwhelmed. In the opening weeks of Barbarossa, German armies achieved a series of spectacular victories. Army Group Center executed vast encirclement operations. Near Minsk and Smolensk, hundreds of thousands of Soviet soldiers were trapped and captured. Army Group South pushed deep into Ukraine. The Battle of Kiev resulted in another massive Soviet defeat. These early successes seemed to confirm German pre-war assessments. The Wehrmacht appeared unstoppable, and the collapse of the Soviet Union felt imminent. However, beneath the surface of these stunning successes, problems were beginning to emerge. The vast distances were straining German supply lines, and Soviet resistance was proving far more tenacious than anticipated. Section 6, the turning of the tide. From Moscow's gates to Stalingrad's crucible. As autumn 1941 progressed, the seemingly unstoppable German advance began to falter. The infamous Russian autumn rains turned the unpaved roads into impassable quagmires of mud. This severely hampered German mobility. Supply lines struggled to deliver essential fuel, ammunition, and food to the frontline troops. Simultaneously, Soviet resistance was stiffening. New divisions, including those transferred from Siberia and the Far East, were thrown into the fight. The sheer manpower reserves of the Soviet Union began to tell. The climax of the 1941 campaign came with the Battle of Moscow. Codenamed Operation Typhoon, the German offensive to capture the Soviet capital began in late September. Initially, it made good progress. However, by late November, the German spearheads were exhausted. They faced increasingly desperate Soviet resistance. Then, the brutal Russian winter arrived early and with unusual severity. In early December 1941, the Red Army launched a major counter-offensive around Moscow. The exhausted and freezing German troops were pushed back. This was the first large-scale strategic defeat suffered by the Wehrmacht in World War II. Section 7, Barbarossa's Bitter Harvest, reshaping a world at war and lessons unheeded. The failure of Operation Barbarossa was arguably the most significant turning point of World War II in the European theatre. Hitler's gamble to achieve a swift victory over the Soviet Union had failed catastrophically. The campaign drained Germany of irreplaceable manpower and vast quantities of materiel. The Wehrmacht suffered hundreds of thousands of casualties. The immense resources poured into the Eastern Front also weakened Germany's ability to fight effectively on other fronts. Operation Barbarossa transformed the nature of the war. It opened up the Eastern Front, which became the primary land theater of conflict in Europe. The human cost was almost unimaginable. The Soviet Union suffered an estimated 27 million deaths. For Germany, the dream of Eastern conquest turned into a nightmarish war of attrition. The long-term impact of Barbarossa's failure was immense. It ensured the survival of the Soviet Union, which emerged from the war as a global superpower. The Red Army's eventual victory led to the Soviet domination of Eastern European countries. The historical lessons from Operation Barbarossa are numerous and profound, reminding us of the catastrophic consequences when such warnings go unheeded.